something I think Kunal will tell us. Kunal, is 22,000 at risk now?
Yeah, the floodgates are open for the markets. I think after yesterday's bounce also, even though yesterday in terms of point-wise, there was a 300, 400 point bounce on the Nifty, but you could not really, find the sector trends which is required for the index to start off a new uptrend in case if, that was a signal yesterday. I think the only positive sign yesterday which you saw, defense stocks and few of them which showed, I think, double-digit gains. That was one positive sign. And the other is the mid-cap end of the market or the small-cap end of the market, which saw double-digit gains for many individual stocks. That was the only shining, spot for the markets. But other than that, you look at pharma index, you look at IT, you look at banks. From the way these stocks opened up yesterday towards the close, I think it all indicated that there was more of a selling which was going on for the, for rest of the stocks. In that kind of a scenario, it's very difficult to try and assume that the markets will probably sustain those bounce back. We've seen 300, 400 point bounce in the last, I think, many days. But immediately in the next couple of days, you see the index selling off and then we coming back towards retest of the previous supports and then making fresh lows. So I think in that context, yes, the trend is weak.
So Kunal, once again, do you think irrespective of yesterday's rebound, it'll be back to the Nifty bank, which will weigh heavy on the markets?
Yeah, that's the concern, Aisha, because, financials, banks, you look at large cap names, Reliance, L&T, they're not doing that much. So, when you have 50% of the composition of the Nifty 50, which is still at the losing end or at the underperforming end, it's going to be very, very difficult for the index to try and, find a way out and come out of this, massive corrective as well as a, downtrending phase. So I think in that context, banks, financials would weigh heavy. The concern initially was, maybe I think a couple of months back, that the private sector end of the banking stocks are lagging behind. But now we also have the PSU banking stocks, which are slowly and steadily starting to show signs of cracks for themselves. You're seeing many of the stocks either coming back closer to their long-term moving averages, the 200 DMA that is, respectively, or many of the stocks showing signs of weakness and breaking the previous swing pattern supports. That I think is a sign of concern because earlier PSU banking stocks, they had risen up 30% second half of 2025. From there, these stocks coming back to their mean reversion point was initially considered to be a profit booking spree. But now with the initial signs of crack which is emerging into the PSU banking names, it gets a lot more weaker for the entire banking space.
Interesting. Kunal, so how would you position yourself in a market like this? It clearly looks like a sell on rise market, right?
Yes.
In terms of a sector preference or a tilt, do you have one?
In terms of a downside?
In terms of a downside, which we can now capture and create as our upside. So just trying to figure out as to what best to buy or sell or short at this point.
See, banks, financials, of course, are the ones which are very weak, which continue to be very weak, and they should be considered as good points where traders can keep on initiating fresh shorts as now you see a reasonable bounce. The only concern over here is that how much bounce can you expect? Whether you're looking at a 3% bounce or a 5% bounce. That depends on the beta of the stocks, the previous resistances of the stocks, etc. So that's one measurement which one has to try and take note of. Even the IT stocks, for example, I think have been showing signs of weakness or not maybe as strong as possible in the previous phase of the price correction for these IT names. So there are a lot many. In fact, yesterday what we saw also that few of the large cap pharma names, they also started to show signs of sharp correction, whether it was Sun Pharma, Lupin, Cipla, Glenmark Pharma, etc. I think all of these stocks start to show signs of weakness. So
what stock specific ideas would you bet on today?
So, out of the other spaces, the likes of Voltas, Blue Star, Havells, they are the ones which start to show signs of crack yesterday. Havells is something which I'll pick as a selling call. The stock showed signs of weakness, confirming a break below its previous supports of 1200 approximately. So we'll look out for targets in the range of 1160 for Havells, suggesting a sell with a stop loss at 1200. The second would be a sell on IDFC First Bank. The trend still continues to be very weak for the stock price, trading at closer to 60 and a half levels for IDFC First Bank. Continue to be bearish on the stock price, even in the near term. 57.5 as a target and stop loss at 62.5.
Well, a couple of sell calls. So clearly, Kunal evidently giving his view that it's not looking pretty, at least for Indian markets. Let me in fact go across